No one ever looked at Alara when she cleaned the palace floors.
We must act
That was
now.
how
The
she
signs are
survived.
clear.
She kept her head down, her hands raw from soap and stone, her body folded small so the nobles wouldn't notice her existence. The vampire palace was vast, towering arches, endless corridors, cold marble that swallowed sound. It was beautiful, terrifying, and unforgiving to humans like her. Alara had once lived in a border village so poor it barely existed on any map. Her mother died young. Her father taught her languages while trading across foreign lands, Russian, Old Slavic, Eastern dialects, before debt and hunger stole everything. Palace service was supposed to save her. Instead, it erased her. One evening, while scrubbing near the eastern corridor, 3 vampire nobles stopped nearby. They spoke casually, confidently, in Russian. Alara's breath caught. No one in this palace spoke that language. No one, except her. She understood every word. They were planning to assassinate vampire King Alaric during the upcoming peace ceremony. Poisoned ceremonial wine. Bribed guards. A rival bloodline ready to seize the throne. They laughed while discussing his death. When their footsteps faded, Alara stayed frozen on her knees, her hands shaking. She was a nobody. But she was the only one who knew. By dawn, a king would die, unless an invisible girl found the courage to speak. Alara didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined the vampire king collapsing before the court, war erupting, innocents slaughtered. She knew what would follow: chaos. She had seen it in Borderlands. At dawn she made a decision. She would warn him even if it cost her life. Finding herself near the royal wing was dangerous. Human servants were forbidden there. But fate placed King Alaric alone in a strategy chamber, studying maps under pale morning light. He was nothing like the legends. No crown. No armor. Just a tall, still figure radiating quiet power. His presence alone made the air feel heavier. When Alara spoke, his silver eyes turned to her, sharp, ancient, unreadable. What business does a floor maid have here? Her voice trembled, but she didn't retreat. I overheard men planning your murder, in Russian. The room went cold. He didn't accuse her. He didn't shout. He listened. As Alara repeated the conversation, word for word, switching languages flawlessly, something shifted. Not trust yet, but interest. When she finished, Alaric said quietly, "You understand the danger of what you've done?" "Yes." "And you spoke anyway?" "Yes." He studied her for a long moment. "You could have stayed silent," he said. "You chose courage instead." That was the moment everything changed. The girl under his protection, justice begins. The plot was real. By nightfall the conspirators were arrested. The poison secured. The ceremony cancelled. A coup stopped before blood touched the floor. Alara should have returned to the servant quarters. She never did. Instead, she was placed under the king's protection, officially as a translator. Unofficially, as a witness too valuable to lose. The court whispered. Why would a human girl stand beside the vampire king? Why did he listen when she spoke? Alara faced resentment, cruelty, and silent threats. But for the first time in her life, someone powerful stood between her and the world. Alaric never touched her. Never spoke gently. But he noticed everything. When guards sneered, his gaze silenced them. When nobles mocked, their invitations disappeared. When Alara doubted herself, he gave her responsibility. Slowly, the girl who once scrubbed floors began to stand taller. And the king, feared, cold, untouchable, began to change too. The truth that binds them, twist plus emotional peak. The final traitors were exposed during foreign negotiations. Once again, Alara heard what others could not. She saved the kingdom twice. That night, Alaric finally asked the question he'd avoided. Why did you risk everything for me? Alara answered honestly. Because power should protect, not destroy. Silence followed. Then the king revealed the truth, an ancient prophecy tied to his bloodline. A human woman, linguist of lost tongues, whose courage would prevent the kingdom's fall. A queen chosen not by blood, but by character. Alara wasn't just a servant. She was destined. But destiny meant choice. Alaric knelt, not as a ruler but as a man. Stand beside me, he said. Not as protection. As my equal. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time, someone didn't see her as small. They saw her as worthy. The crown she never asked for, ending plus moral. The coronation was quiet. No spectacle. No forced loyalty. Just a human girl crowned queen beside a vampire king who had learned humility. Those who once mocked her bowed. Those who abused power were stripped of it. And the kingdom changed. Elara ruled with kindness. Alaric ruled with restraint. Together they proved a truth the world often forgets. Greatness is not born from strength alone, but from the courage to protect the powerless. The queen they refused to accept. Becoming queen did not mean peace. The moment Elara stood beside King Alaric on the obsidian throne dais, the palace divided itself in silence. Some bowed with respect. Others lowered their heads while hatred burned behind their eyes. A human queen was an insult to centuries of vampire pride. Whispers followed her through corridors once scrubbed by her own hands. Nobles questioned her blood, her worth, her right to rule. Some openly refused to address her as queen. Elara felt the old fear return, the instinct to shrink, to disappear. But Alaric never allowed it. He did not threaten. He did not rage. He simply stood beside her, immovable, letting the court understand a single truth. Disrespect to her was treason to him. Still danger brewed. Not all enemies had been exposed. She entered the palace as a forgotten girl, and left it as a queen, not because she was chosen by fate, but because she chose courage when silence was safer. The attempt on her life, protection turns personal. The attack came at night. Elara woke to shattered glass and the scent of poison. Shadows moved in her chamber, silent, professional, trained to kill quickly. She never screamed. Before the assassin could strike, the door exploded inward. King Alaric moved faster than thought, not as a ruler, but as a protector driven by fear he did not yet understand. The intruder did not survive the encounter. When silence returned, Elara was shaking. Alaric knelt before her, gripping her hands too tightly, his control fractured for the first time since she had met him. "You are not replaceable," he said quietly. "Not to the kingdom. Not to me." It was the first time his voice carried emotion. And it changed everything. Love spoken without words. After that night, distance vanished. Alaric began walking beside her instead of ahead. He listened when she spoke of policies affecting humans and border villages. He adjusted laws that had once favored only vampire elites. Elara watched him change, not through grand speeches but through actions. He ate when she reminded him. Rested when she insisted. Learned to trust when fear had ruled him for centuries. Their love did not arrive as a confession. It grew in shared silences. In late-night strategy discussions. In the way his hand always found hers when danger loomed. The court noticed. The kingdom noticed. And for the first time, vampire and human factions began speaking instead of sharpening knives. The final reckoning, justice served. The last rebellion came from those who believed power was a birthright. An ancient council challenged Elara's crown, attempting to strip her title through blood law. The trial was meant to humiliate her. Instead, she stood unafraid. She spoke not of prophecy but of sacrifice. Of overheard plots. Of courage chosen over survival. Of a kingdom saved not by fangs, but by conscience. When the council demanded Alaric choose between tradition and love, he rose. "I was born king," he said. "But I learned how to rule from her." The rebellion collapsed that day. Not through violence but through truth. A kingdom remade. Years passed. The kingdom transformed. Humans were no longer invisible. Servants were educated. Borders were protected without cruelty. Power answered to responsibility. Elara never forgot who she had been. She visited the servant quarters. She listened. She remembered. And Alaric, once feared, once distant, became a legend not for his strength, but for his restraint. Together they ruled not as myth, but as example. The child the prophecy never named. The first cry echoed through the palace at dawn. It was not loud, not dramatic, just small and human. Yet every ancient stone seemed to breathe differently after that sound. Elara held the child in her arms, overwhelmed by fear and wonder. She had faced assassins, councils, and kings, but nothing prepared her for the fragile weight of new life. The child bore no fangs. No crimson eyes. No visible sign of vampire blood. The court whispered immediately. Some called it weakness. Others called it a mistake. A few called it a threat. Alaric said nothing. He stood beside Elara, one hand resting gently on her shoulder, his gaze fixed on the child with an intensity that silenced the room. "This child," he said calmly, "will not be measured by blood." The prophecy had spoken of a queen, not an heir. And for the first time, the kingdom realized destiny had never been about power, it was about choice.